we start with maybe as to what are the penalty provisions in the law. The law does talk about a maximum penalty of 250 crores as of now. But the law also simultaneously says, as to it all depends upon the kind of breach, the kind of maybe due diligence the organization might have done, the loss to the impact to the citizens, maybe a wrongful gain to the organization, and therefore, one, that a penalty of whatever amount it is does not mean that this is the one which is going to be levied. And that's the extreme case. But what it also simultaneously conveys is that the law should be able to provide enough of deterrents, particularly to the non-compliant organizations, to the non-compliant data fiduciaries. To that an extent, I do believe, and that's what has been written in the preamble of the law itself, that we are not a country which is looking for penalties. We are a country which is a growing country. We want the whole digital ecosystem to grow, while of course simultaneously ensuring that the due rights of the citizen in terms of privacy protection are taken care of. So it's a right balance of what the expectations should be versus what the duties of the organizations in terms of privacy protection should be. Thank you.
So I think it's a very pertinent time if we talk about our country. And if you see, always we were focusing on security by design, but it's the real time then we have to focus on both the aspects. Privacy actually matters, and that's very good that if you see, we have seen GDPR in action since long. Then if you talk about California Consumer Privacy Act, so those things are already in action. Now in India also, this is a right step where we have to look into all sectors, whether we are talking about manufacturing, BFSI, retail, e-commerce. So something which is matters is privacy and the protection of the personal data. And obviously the consequences when we talk about the financial aspects, right? There are certain aspects. So 250 crores when we talk about, that is the maximum value, as he rightly mentioned. There are different aspects where you have to, for example, if you're not complying to the security requirements, then there is a different amount of penalty which is getting imposed. If you are not making it privacy notification to the data subject or the DPA board, then it is a different amount. So it is very clearly mentioned in the law itself. And apart from financial damage, the important thing is to understand the non-financial requirements also. What is the penalties when we talk about the reputational loss and all, organizations, customers, stakeholder and all. There is you can say that there is some sort of short-term implications, and even the long-term implications also need to understand. You need to invest into your post-breach analysis. The cost is something which is very important. We need to understand how we have to design that in case if there is an aftermath, after attack, all those scenarios are very important to be considered. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. So, see, according to me, this any breach leading to bankruptcy is slightly at the extreme end. And as Basant has already talked about it. So see, in globally, if we see how many examples we have where any bankruptcy has led to, any breach has led to bankruptcy. Not many, right? But at the same time, and along with that, if we see these fines, which are hefty fines, which are coming from regulators, largely if you see the intent of regulators, it's not coming in with that intent of leading a company to die with the fines, right? It's mostly to create the deterrence so that we'll be prepared for that. Now, if we see another angle here, are MSMEs, small and medium scale companies, which are part of the larger supply chain. If something goes wrong there, because if you see global supply chain, various companies are now becoming part of the sensitive larger companies, providing very sensitive support in terms of data processing and all. If something goes wrong there, again, it might not lead to bankruptcy, but it can lead to massive ramifications out of it. For example, if we are a BFSI company having one data processing unit outsourced to a small company, something goes wrong, the kind of implications that we'll have, that would be very difficult. And if something goes wrong at that small entity, again, same thing, it might not lead for that company to die out, but it's definitely going to impact significantly in terms of other large banks and organizations going to give business to that company. So that is definitely one impact going to happen. Another aspect in terms of the branding and all, how things are happening. So if you look at mobile manufacturers or communication platform providers are coming up with that intent or branding mechanism that we are providing privacy. So more than if something goes wrong there, then again it's going to lead to a lot of disruption in terms of business adoption for those people. For example, in Cambridge Analytica case, I don't know how true it is, but I have read somewhere it's almost 66% dip happened in terms of Facebook user around a couple of weeks of time. After that, again, it recovered. But that immediate impact that we have seen, same thing, might not lead to bankruptcy, might not lead to disruption of that business, but it can have a very massive ramifications. So this is how I see. And going forward, the way businesses are expanding, the way digitization is happening, and the phygital kind of things, physical is coming up with the digital thing. Going forward, the data, the way data is expanding in terms of value, volume, and velocity, the ramification is again going to be much more higher than what we can see today. So that's why I think we can see a lot of hefty fines coming in from regulators, but at the same time, the intent is not to sort of disrupt the business, but create deterrence so that we'll be prepared for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for this opportunity. And I know I'm the only probably product centric, so I should really look at how do I make the product more related. And there is no fun in a panel when there is no contradictions, right? So I have to contradict him. I have to contradict Atul more. But I think the stat says 60% of the medium small enterprises that go through a breach shut down in 6 months. 6 months. That's the world statistics, right? So it's really alarming in terms of what is happening. One is the direct cause of what we are seeing from fines, from regulators or legislators. Yeah, I think that's one angle. But if you look at from indirect, I think the numbers are really scary. I know GDPR, CCPA, DPDP will come into the action, and some of those will be very obvious to us. But whatever the survey reports, whatever our understanding in terms of building, when we are building the product, we saw an organization that doesn't really comply and goes through a breach and gets to a situation, I think their growth rate comes down by at least more than 5%. That's a concern. I think in a crunched economy, when everyone is growing in single digits, coming down by just 3% or 5% really hurts. And the other report talks about that because of the breach, just because of the breach, leave about what is there happening in terms of growth rate, even in terms of the profitability, the revenue, or the market fluctuations are really alarming. I think we have seen some banks, we have seen how Target, we have seen what happened to Uber when they went through that situation. I think there are definitely concerns that will emerge out. I think that fluctuations will become apparent even in India once some of these things come really into the action. So I would disagree with Atul saying that it doesn't go through bankruptcy.
Okay, thank you. I love the way the conversation started in talking about the point of bankruptcy. The reason why it is putting so much importance and on the organization and putting an importance on the privacy and the security factors, which needs to be enabled at each design level or operational level, which has been enforced. So I love the topic, but not everyone. Anyway, there are pointers on regulatory fines. There are pointers on legal costs. There are pointers on revenue losses and reputational damages that we'll follow. And especially on the point on Mr. Lalit, which was talking about a smaller organization or a startups. There are pointers on DPDPA talking about exceptions for the startups or the small companies. So on the way, the next pointers we can discuss, I believe. Yeah. Okay. The next point, how does the DPDP Act address financial penalties and how do these compare to other jurisdictions? Yeah. So anyone, please. Yeah. Mr. Rakesh, if you would like to take it up.
See, I mean, it's something, I mean, which is practically coming out from the textbooks, the law. So maybe in GDPR, it is in terms of volume, it is much, much higher. It also talks of global turnover, which can be up to, I mean, and the fines can be up to 4%. Maybe in Singapore, it is much, much lesser. Once again, I will say, and therefore, I mean, there is no point, of course, comparing what others are charging versus maybe what we are going to penalize in India or what regulator is going, not the regulator, the adjudicator is going to do here in India. But most important, I do believe is that because we have an altogether different culture in terms of privacy, of course, misuse of data must not happen. And as long as the organization, the data fiduciary in the context of DPDP Act is able to convey that they had been doing due diligence. Breaches do happen, by the way. Security breaches do happen. All the international standards do recognize this. And this should also be recognized as part of DPDP Act implementation as well. And therefore, I do believe that as and when the adjudicator, the board, comes in picture, has developed its own SOPs to be able to decide as to what level of maybe penalties as and when required to be penalized should be there. I do believe that the rationality will definitely be in their mind, and to begin with, it should definitely be on a much, much lower side, but simultaneously sending a message that this is something, I mean, compliance to the law is important. So it's always the side effects probably which are much, much more crucial, whether in terms of credibility in the market, whether it's because those I'll say will happen much, much faster. As soon as the breach is known, the impact is immediately there in the market. Maybe the board may take its own sweet time to be able to decide. And then it's not just about the board. There is a review provision available wherein you can once again request to the board. There is an alternate adjudication mechanism which is also available. And please also understand, it's the data principle versus the organization. So the two parties are already very, very skewed ones, in which data principle is going to get nothing. And if it is a reference being made by the central government or the state government or maybe the court, they themselves are not going to be the party as far as adjudication process is going on. So it's left completely to the board. So I do believe, I mean, of course, wait and watch, but the rationality will always be there. Don't over worry with respect to what others are charging, less or more, both ways.
No, I Good morning. I agree with Rakesh ji that while there are globally we have references, we have seen, I would say, big penalties in Europe, etc. But in India, one, it will take time to mature. That's number one. Number two, what we as organizations have to do is, or as data fiduciaries, what we need to do is that we need to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Because if the regulator or the board will see that we are doing all the right things, then obviously the quantum of penalties or things which comes our way would be much lesser. That's what we all are expecting. While none of us have seen that, but that's what our expectations are, or we assume that that should happen. And last but not the least, the overall cost obviously would be much higher. Penalties would be just a part of it. The investigation cost or the cost of reputation, etc., cost of business, cost of opportunity, actually, all this would be much higher than just the penalty piece. That might be very, very small, but overall it would hurt the business. So we have to make sure that we are doing all the right things. We are ticking in the box at all the right places. I think that's the most important thing we need to do.
So, Mr. Dhananjay, would you also like to add upon pointers on any sector-specific fines? See, we talked about DPDP penalties and fines, but do you see, is there any sector-specific fines, since if you want to add up anything? Yeah.
So we come from a very, I would say, unique sector from the banking BFSI, and our regulator is obviously RBI, and I would say one of the most active and most stringent regulator in the country, and maybe all over the globe, one of the most active regulators we have seen. While there are no penalties which are defined per se by any of the RBI regulations, but we all have seen those penalties coming in the past, recent past, as well as I would say a little far past. So those can obviously be, that really hurts whenever it comes. So I think we all are, most of us who follow the BFSI sector or the banking sector in the country are aware of those penalties. I would not like to discuss those, but those are absolutely more stringent than any of the GDPRs of the globe, actually. Right.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just pick up one point here in terms of the compliance burden, probably not just penalties. What's happening, like one is DPDPA coming up with a huge penalty, again a deterrence. Certain has one penalty which is very small, like 1 lakh, but it has attached criminal offense to that, right? The certain directions which came in, it was 28th of April 2022, if I remember correctly, right? Where if the data breach is happening, you have to inform, then that kind of compliance. Similarly, the regulators will come. So the challenge for the organizations would be the compliance burden. More than that fine, it's the compliance burden which is coming in from multiple regulators, multiple authorities, and then they have to manage that parallelly. That's something which we feel it's a bit tedious for organizations to take care of, especially if organization is at a small scale.
Thank you.
And one more point, actually, just to rectify that, that 60% this breaches leading to MSMEs dying out, 60%, that came from McKinsey or IBM, NIST, if I remember, that was popular a year back. But then there was a rectification on that. It is not a correct stat. So.
Okay.
One more thing I'll
But there is a bankruptcy happening.
I'll also like to mention one more thing. See, RBI or any other regulator, that's one part, which is also there, which is already there in their license terms and conditions as on today. As regards CERT, of course, with the ease of doing business, and the amendment which have been carried out in 2023, the penalty, of course, amount has been increased to 1 crore, but the criminal I'll say, criminal penalty has been reduced to 1 year. Now, that is not with respect to the breach. That is with respect to the breach not being informed, or CERT, whatever data they are looking for, not being provided to CERT. And that's a very clear intention. I mean, so they are not looking into the breach and the repercussions and why it happened. I mean, how it happened. They are looking it from a vulnerability perspective, and to how to plug that, and whether the organization is really committed to plug those holes. So any penalty by CERT, by the way, they have not as yet levied anything. Not. They have only issued warnings, and that's it. And that too, everything will have to be decided by the court and not by CERT themselves. So हाथी के दांत और उस तरह से ही थोड़ा सा देखिए. But yes, the aim is very clear. They want to improve the security.
Thank you.
I would just like to share my experience. So I think whether it's compliance or whether it is the number of regulators that are there, and I want to share an experience of how I've seen a US bank. I mean, at any given point of time, we used to have at least 7, 8 regulators always coming for some audit or the other, ongoing. But I mean, when I look at it, with all that, still the bank went through the challenges in terms of someone trying to take an exploit of the data. I think it's that mindset of when I'm building an organization, when I'm having a customer data, is that privacy by design, is that security by design, rather than seeing it as a burden, rather than it is another compliance as a tick mark, or is it someone to be satisfied? It's my moral responsibility, ethics in terms of what I do. I think that commitment is what I'm guessing, whether it is the penalties or whether it is the regulations that is trying to inject into the business, rather than seeing it, yeah, किसी को डांटना है या किसी को मारना है. That's the view that I have.
Thank you. Okay. So we've talked about a lot on the privacy penalties, fines, and adherence. Now, to meet the adherence, I believe there is an operational cost. It could be a product, it could be an assurance program to meet that objective of privacy laws. So I would like to open this point on operational cost to meet the DPDP or the privacy adherence. Yeah.
Yeah, so Vasant, if you see, this is very pertinent point in the context what we are dealing with. Particularly if you see, there are two costs, right? So operational and compliance cost also associated with it. But coming to the operational, first of all, we need to understand the board has yet to come with the classification of the fiduciary itself. So there will be some sort of significant data fiduciaries, and accordingly the associated compliance will be some sort of difference, because there is a mandated DPO role for the significant data fiduciary. Because if I talk about our context also, so before joining here at JK, I was looking into the income tax department operations. So there, if you see, the sensitivity of data and the volume of data getting processed for the taxpayers is having some sort of a different scale itself. So where the DPO role is mandated itself as part of the compliance. But coming to operational cost, if you see, more or less all the organizations have to do the similar set of implementations, be it the infrastructure upgrades. So infrastructure upgrades, for example, there should be a secure data storage systems in all the organizations, because the data leakage controls, that has to be very intact. And when come to the monitoring of the data leakages, and also you can say that organizations have to look into the holistic DLP framework. They need to invest into DLP across all the channels, be it your email channel or your cloud, your network, or your endpoints. So these all needs to be fairly protected. When it comes to the implementation of the encryption, all those things, because these days organizations are adopting a lot of SaaS applications, cloud based applications. So the business context need to be completely understood, and accordingly the encryption related stuffs where the actual data protection has to happen. So monitoring is one part, but what about the protection itself? Data at rest, something what we are seeing is it as a concern, and there is no visibility in most of the organizations. They are just understanding that we have adopted the SaaS architecture and all, because this is something which is very technical aspects we need to understand, because data protection, when we are talking about, it is not only the governance piece, but how data protection mature controls organizations are having, because the business wants some sort of resilience, and that's why they are just adopting something in the cloud, something in the software model, and that opens a complete Pandora box in terms of not understanding the data at the rest requirements. And we see that there are multiple leakages happening from the SaaS platforms, right? For example, if you see, we are using CRM platform at Salesforce. For logistics operations, we are using Oracle Transport Management Systems. So these systems, if you see, they are they complying with all the requirements and standards? That is something which is very important. And are just we are looking into their SOC compliances, or we are actually demanding their privacy certifications also? That is equally important. So these all operational costs are something which is important in terms of implementation of data protection control, then monitoring related stuffs, and finally, when we are talking about privacy, there should be a systematic investment. I think all of us will agree, and we are obviously Dhananjay coming from BFSI sector. So the privacy, when we are talking about, the most concerning factor is the people part. Okay, so when we are talking about the education of the people, we always focus on the security matters, cyber security and all. These days we have to invest into training models, right? The right set of education programs need to be created. Have you seen any organizations just doing some sort of simulations on the privacy? No. So these all have to be conceptualized, and there should be a systematic privacy training, right? Including and it has to be mandated by the boardroom agenda also. So what we have done, we are always talking about cyber risk as a important slide in the boardroom meetings, but now we have inculcated a process where we are talking about privacy risk at the group level itself. So if you see JK organization, we are a big business conglomerate dealing into 14 businesses across the globe. So that's very important, and the vision from the top management is very clear that we have to invest into privacy. We need to respect the privacy, protect the personal data of our customers and associated stakeholders, because we just discussed it's not about the financial damage that, and when Dhananjay clearly mentioned that it is just a small portion of the overall risk coming to the organization. If you see the privacy risk, the last impact is something where you are going to lose the customer stakeholder trust. So that is very important, and that we have to protect. And when it comes to giving back to the society, all the organizations and individuals have to think about the privacy as the important factor.
Thank you, Benith. So, you rightfully called out talking about the asset inventory and classification of the data, and then looking into a product that will support the protection of the data, and also an assurance program that will help you in terms of providing assurance to you internally as well as for your customers. Yeah, thank you.
I think just to add to what Vaidyanath said, our opinion, or I would say my opinion, is that the cost actually we all have to look into. We like many of the organizations, we deal with large set of third parties, where we have small third parties who do some part of work what we are supposed to do. So we have outsourced greatly, and these third parties are not very large organizations. In many cases they are small third parties actually, and the compliance cost for these would be huge. Maybe the kind of compliance we are looking for, or the regulation is looking for, maybe in some cases might be more than their annual turnover in some cases actually. So how to kind of divide that, or how the large organizations or the big organization, we might have to get into a data-centric security, look at what kind of data we are right now sharing and what we may have to share, and how some models we may have to evolve, where we give the least amount of data, or we can, without PII, can we work by giving that? Because in many cases, our understanding or our assumption is that these people may not be able to sustain if we start passing on the entire compliance, cost of compliance to these organizations. And in some cases, we might have to kind of share that compliance cost, basically. We put some controls, or we share some of those. So I would say, as the time go, this will get evolved actually. But certainly the compliance cost for big organizations may not hurt that much. We might able to put it, etc., etc. But for a smaller and MSME area, there it might hurt, and in many cases they may not be able to. It may not be sustainable actually.
I think this time I would definitely agree with Dhananjay ji. So if you look at the incident that happened in Medibank in Australia, I think it's a classic case of data minimization not being there, and that led to the infiltrator doing whatever they want to do in terms of getting access to it, then exploiting it. I think we are at a right balance in terms of the seriousness coming towards security, privacy, AML. It goes to the way that how, if you recollect, the TV manufacturers, if you wanted 10,000 rupees, there was only a certain type of a TV that you would get it. But over a period of time, today you would get that LED, right? Even for the 10,000 rupees, a good quality LED. My view is, I think we are getting to that cusp of where some of this rationalization, some of this what you want to do in terms of what is that, I mean, would everyone go about buying products? Is there an opportunity for consolidation? And I think if you look at from a security perspective, some of those are already happening. Platformization, SASE, rather than everyone saying, I will buy firewall, I will buy zero trust network access, I would buy something else for CASB. I think that consolidation is going to come out. It's my view is, in the next couple of years, we would start seeing that consolidation and see what is that we can draw synergies so that, we are not investing unnecessarily in tools, but also taking an advantage of how we can put them together to get that single pane view of price, security and privacy.
Thank you.
So I'll just add one thing here in terms of complexity, what Dhananjay said, so third parties and all. Another thing is in-house. Say like with the advent of emerging tech, now everybody is trying to use emerging tech for the productivity at the organization level to gain the competitive edge, and there's no choice, we have to use the emerging tech, whether it's AI, ML, Gen AI, now quantum and all, whatever it is. Now that is another thing. If you have a like privacy by design approach, but the people, again, they are the one using it. So even we have to find out a way to evolve our privacy practices, our data protection practices, and here, again, technology is going to play a very critical role. And in what Dr. Lalit is doing in this organization, previously in IDRBT, what we have done, say this technology side thing. For example, I'm a bank working in 5 geographies, complying with different sort of regulations, making it automated using the technology. Then what kind of new technologies are coming in? Again, going back, leveraging that emerging tech, what kind of new technologies are coming in? Whether it's homomorphic encryption for data sharing or polymorphic encryption in terms of cross-border data sharing, or so on and so forth. If we leverage all of those things, probably the concern of the cost of compliance will come down. On one hand, it looks like we are spending more on that platforms and the technology, but at the same time, it's going to reduce down our burden and enable us to comply with the different kind of compliance requirement in more efficient way. So this is something which is happening, and in India also we have seen a lot of companies coming in which are offering data protection solutions or privacy solutions. So in last 5-6 years of time frame, when this data protection narrative has started getting stronger, we have a lot of companies, we typically call it like think privacy, think technology. Probably that's going to help us, and especially for the point of this MSMEs and small players, that's going to help us reduce their compliance burden in terms of costing and enabling their effective workflows. So this is something that we need to definitely look at and nurture it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Atul. So in the interest of time, we'll close with this last point. So let's give a point for relief for the business, small and medium business owners. So how can insurance and risk management strategies mitigate the financial risks that either it could be due to breaches or it could be due to penalties which is coming from sector specific regulations. So anyone, would you like to take this point?
So, I think theoretically we all have heard that this is like a risk transfer by kind of getting into taking a cyber insurance or a privacy insurance, etc., etc. But practically, it would be difficult. And again, as in the case of insurance, it will only be able to. So certainly, it will help in short term in kind of taking some of the burden off of investigation, taking care of a little bit of penalty. But before that, certainly, we have to make sure that we are doing enough, because even insurance will not cover if we are not doing enough. So I think that's the bottom line, that if we are doing enough and we are able to prove that to the insurer, but before that, insurer, even if we are doing good or we are doing enough and we are able to prove that to the regulator or to the board, even the penalty, the amount of penalty or the amount of burden which is coming our way may get down. So I think that's one is the bottom line. Second, for midterm and short-term losses, business loss or productivity loss, etc., I think no insurance can cover that. So insurance coverage would, in a short term, would certainly help, and that's why recommendation would be that we should we should all have cyber insurance, not only for us but even for our third parties actually. So I think that's very important, and that's not the culture I have seen much in country. Globally it's very mature, but in the country we are again getting maturity towards that. So not only looking at cyber insurance for ourselves, but for our third parties, for our service providers, compelling them to take enough cyber insurance, so that if tomorrow something happens in their environment which impacts us, we are covered actually. So that I think that's very, very important in this area.
So just wanted to add what Dhananjay mentioned. So when it comes to insurance, obviously, as he rightly mentioned, it is the immediate some sort of, you can say that relieving the financial burden. But whether the contract or contract with the insurance agency is properly evaluated or not. So even the involvement of the agencies like DSCI is something certainly organizations should be looking up to, because they are working for data protection in India, and they are focusing and working with all the insurance sector or even the startups also in the privacy sector. So that is very important, that you are reviewing the contract with the insurance agency, and there should be a compliance dashboards for the organizations. And obviously the focus should not be like that the insurance is going to cover you, but what is your security standards and privacy standards, that matters actually. How you are leveraging operations wise or at the governance level, even the boardroom involvement. So these all things are important, so that your compliance dashboards are so strong. When there will be some sort of breach, you will be enough demonstrations to showcase to the regulators, your insurance companies and all those things. Because we have seen in the past also, even when there will be some sort of breach, they are going to help you immediately, but then there will be the increased cost and premium. So how we are looking into that also is very important, right? So the compliance at our end is something which is principally we have to make it strong. The dashboards are so strong that you are always looking into your compliance. It should not be like that when you are getting audited, then only you are looking into the compliance, but it's a systematic approach that we have to look into. And obviously the insurance clauses are now everywhere, because we are also revising our insurance contracts and all. So we are also looking into that, how we are going to cover the data protection controls, and even what is the maturity or even amount that is there in the clause itself.
Thank you, Dhananjay. Thank you, Baidyanath. So this has been rightfully called out. It's a point-in-time recovery. As an insurance, it's one-time activity when there is an issue happens. But recovering it from a reputational damage, it also matters. So very clearly called out. And thanks everyone for being part of the panel. Mr. Rakesh, Mr. Dhananjay, Mr. Baidyanath, Mr. Atul, and Mr. Lalit. Thank you. Thanks for your wonderful insights. Thank you.